Hi, in this video I'll give you my thoughts on the Schneider Kreuznach LK Samyang 14-24mm F2.8 for Sony FE mount. It's ultra wide and pretty lightweight, but is it ultra good and punching above that weight? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Simon, a professional photographer based in the south of England, working for companies doing interiors and branding, and also my own abstract work and a bit of other stuff as well. I was really excited when I first heard about the Samyang 14-24mm F2.8. I currently use the Sigma 14-24mm F2.8 art lens for my interior work, and that lens is an amazing lens, but it is quite big and quite heavy as well. So this lens from Samyang promised to be a lot smaller and a lot more lightweight. And the other thing about the Sigma is, because of the bulbous front element, you can't put filters in, but the Samyang, you can actually put standard screw-in filters, which was exciting. I wanted to try the lens, so I reached out to Holden, who are the UK distributors for Samyang, and the lovely people there kindly lent me a lens for a few weeks so that I could try it out and give you my thoughts. So thanks so much to them. So as always, I want to give you my honest thoughts of the lens for my usage and in my use case scenario. So I've gone out and photographed some of my work and some landscapes and even a bit of street stuff, and yeah, we'll see how we get on. Developed jointly by Schneider Kreuznach and Samyang, this lens weighs 445 grams by my little scales, and that happens to be 350 grams, so almost half the weight of the Sigma lens that I have been using. So when the lens is attached to the camera, it feels really nice, and it makes the whole shooting experience really quite comfortable, and it feels quite balanced. The lens does extend at the wider end of the focal range, and it's got an AF/MF switch on the side, so you can switch it in the field quite quickly. And also there's the custom button on the side, which is by default set to focus hold or focus lock, and that can be reprogrammed within the camera to any one of a million different options. The zoom ring and the focus ring have a really nice rubberized texture that I found really comfortable to hold, and it gave you quite a good grip on it. Not that you ever need that much of a grip on it, but I can imagine with gloves or in cold weather or whatever, it was really comfortable to use. The lens is weather sealed. It provides protection against water droplets, light rain, snow and dust. They do say it's not guaranteed to be dust and drip resistant in all situations under all conditions. So I guess don't go playing with it in the bath, but it should be okay for most other situations, I guess. There's also a USB-C port on the lens, which is great for firmware updates. And the lens comes with a petal-shaped lens hood, which provides some protection against flaring and snaps on with quite a positive click. So now let's see how the lens performs. So here's the first image I wanted to show you. And I went to somewhere local called Wagoner's Wells, where there's these ponds and beautiful trees all around them on this lovely sunny day, and took this picture. Well, I took several pictures that I'll show you in due course, but this is at 14mm at f9, so normal sort of landscape f number. If we were to zoom into this picture, you can see there's beautiful sharpness in the center of the image and just lovely rendering. Even in the corners, there's still plenty of sharpness and detail. And interestingly though, I then did a quick comparison with the Sigma 14-24, which is on the right here, and you can see they're very similar. Although this is the first time I noticed the colour rendition of the Samyang is slightly more magenta-y and less, is that a phrase? Magenta-y, and slightly less yellowy than the Sigma. And sometimes I find that generally with the Sony system, I'm not the biggest fan of the slightly yellowy nature of the pictures sometimes. And this was quite a pleasant surprise for me, because it seemed to produce very pleasing colours. I don't know which is the most accurate, but for my personal taste, I do like the colours coming out of the Samyang. So if I zoom in somewhere around here, you can see in the middles of this shot that I've tried to balance the edit with these two images. Both, I haven't touched the white balance of them, but they are similarly brightened and the tripod was in the same place. One thing I would say is that the Sigma is slightly crisper into the corners, but on the flip side of that, the Samyang is wider. So the Samyang's 14mm is wider than the Sigma's 14mm. If we look down at this tree here, that's off the screen over there. So I would have to move this one over a little bit to get to the same place. And then is the sharpness more similar, because we're looking at that little bit of the extra that the Samyang offers. Maybe goes slightly softer, but it's still remarkable, and it's really nice having more image for your 14mm. It's like getting good value for money. So here's a quick comparison between 16mm between the Samyang 14-24, the Sigma 14-24, and also Sony 16-35 PZ F4 lens that I happen to have at the moment. And with that, the Samyang is definitely sharper throughout the, well, not throughout, but especially in the, this top corner. The Sony tends to get a bit smudgy, and I think the Sigma's probably the best and the Samyang's a close second. But generally, in the middle, they're all pretty much of a muchness, to be honest. I think they're all lenses that are brilliant lenses. I have found that the Sony doesn't handle backlit situations as well, but the Samyang seems to do really well in that respect. I haven't had any particular issues in what I've been photographing. So that was just an interesting extra little nugget of something, comparing these three lenses together. I think the colour of the Samyang still is slightly more pleasing to me than the other two, which maybe makes them an accurate depiction of the Sony sensor, and maybe the Samyang is more leaning towards that sort of magenta-y elements to it. And here's another comparison with those three lenses, just again at 18mm, so that's not massively scientific, but you can see how much greener that Samyang image is in this top left-hand corner than the other two, which I like. And if I look at this top right-hand corner again, the Samyang and the Sigma are pretty similar. Maybe the Sigma's slightly sharper in the very edges, but if you get away from the very, very edge, there's very little in it. And the Sony gets a bit more smudgy towards the edges. And here's a shot I just took to, not as a comparison, just a nice shot with these warm shadows in the water and the lovely 14mm viewpoint, just showing you the wonderful images you can get. Wonderful sharpness. I'm not adding any sharpening to any of these images. This is basically, in terms of sharpening, as it comes out of the camera. And this last image that I took, that I wanted to show you from that little shoot, I focused in on this leaf to show you some of the bokeh. This is an F2.8 at 14mm. And yeah, I don't really know what to say about bokeh at 14mm, but I mean, it's not too bad. It's quite smooth. And if you zoom in here, you can see lovely detail on this leaf, which is really cool. And that leads me to another great point about the lens, the close focusing distance, really close. And this shot I took at 24mm of this hydrangea in my garden. And you can see on the edge of this petal how that's really nice and sharp. But the fact that you can get images that close is amazing. And that was at f16. So one of the other things I did was go up to London and take a few shots. And this one is at Waterloo Station. That is the station that takes me into London if I go up by train. And I thought this shot was great because of all this technical ironwork in the roof and everything. You can see how beautifully it's rendered. And this is at 100%. I'm scanning around this image, and even at 200%, there's loads of detail there. And looking at these elements here where they're quite heavily backlit, you'd expect to see some chromatic aberration, and I think there is a tiny weeny bit. I mean, you can see how far we were zoomed in, so nothing to worry about really. Panning into the image, just lovely, beautiful rendering of everything's really super sharp, and at 14mm as this is, get these massive views that are really exciting and take in so much. And, you know, I find them really a great source of creativity because you see so much that it just leads you to want to take images like this. You know, why wouldn't you use 14mm if you've got it available? This is at f7.1, so yeah, really pleased with that one. And then I took another one at Waterloo, just showing you the nice sharpness throughout the image. Yeah, I mean, nothing to complain about really, and that was at 18mm. This next shot was me trying to do street photography, and I saw this guy taking a photograph of the Millennium Bridge that goes across the Thames just opposite the Tate Modern. I'm going to do a video soon on my efforts at street photography because I think I was a bit timid and I think I was moving the camera as so that I didn't have the camera against my eye for very long, and so this one isn't completely sharp, but I do love the width of the angle using the 14mm, and it enables you to get these great wide angle shots. And then I've cropped this one down to the X-pan ratio, which is, I can't remember what it was. So I really like these wide angle panoramic shots that you can get out of a single shot. Then went on to do this one, which I did manage to hold the camera still, and really beautifully sharp all the way to the edge, pretty much. I mean, at the very, very edge, it slightly goes off, but this is at f8 at 14mm. But I mean, it's crazy, and the width of the shot is brilliant for this sort of thing. A wide panoramic crop makes it look really cool in my view. And here's one more shot by the river. These two guys wanted to sort of get the sense of people looking at the river and all of the London going on in the background, the City of London and St Paul's and all the other buildings along by the river. And the lens again does an amazing job of giving me super detail. This is at f8, again at 14mm. It was just, yeah, ridiculous amount of detail, and I love having that wide angle lens to take in everything I can see. So here's one more comparison of the three lenses that I've got, the Samyang, the Sigma and the Sony. I can immediately see that there's more of a bluey, or the resultant of more sort of magenta into the image, whereas on this image on the right, which is the Sigma, there's more yellow in the image, and the Sony is somewhere in between. But I do like the colour of the Samyang, so for me that's quite good, and I'm quite pleased with that. The 14mm on the Samyang can get more, so that little flower on the Sigma over here on the right is the edge of the image for the Sigma, and there's a little bit more on the Samyang, which for me will really help me when I have to do some images in a tight space, in a bathroom or something. Always have a little bit more, but without getting a sense that the image is becoming more distorted in any way. And also that leads me to an interesting point. The lens correction within Capture One anyway seems to be really nice, and the images are really straight. I'm not getting any bent lines or anything, so that's really been done really well. And I think there's a lens profile to download for Lightroom that will do an equally good job. But if I go into this image, just to show you, you mustn't look at whether my kitchen's completely clean or not. So disregard anything to do with that. But yeah, just looking at sharpness and that sort of thing, all very similar in the middle. If we go over to this cushion, here is where the Sigma seems to win slightly. If I go to 200% and we get this cushion in the shot for all of these, the Sigma wins in sharpness stakes, the Samyang second and the Sony third. I did play around with adding some sharpening just to the corners of the Samyang, and that seems to work quite well if I didn't want to sharpen the whole image. I realised that within the lens profile often there's a sharpness fall off fader, but with the manufacturer's profile that isn't highlighted for me, so I can't add that. So I've just added another layer in Capture One and whacked a bit of sharpening on. If I show you what I did there, if I go out and show you the red areas are where I'm adding sharpening, but that's the only area I felt like could be if I wanted to compare it to the Sigma. But without putting that on, just viewing this Samyang image for its own merit. It's a beautiful image and I'm really enjoying the colours that it makes, and the sharpness is brilliant and completely fine for what I need to do with it. And here's a couple of images from a job that I recently did. I had to draw the curtains because outside the window was basically a building site, so we decided that that was the best solution to that. But again here, the image is just really lovely and sharp across its entirety and really just beautifully detailed, and I like the colour, so really happy with that. And here's a kitchen shot which I was really happy with as well. It's one that I've edited. I can see myself using this lens for my work and not having any issues or worries about whether it can produce the goods, because it just clearly is producing the goods. So that was really good. I did want to compare this same shot with the Sigma again, and the Sigma's on the right here, and again slightly more yellowy tone, and again we've got a wider field of view from the Samyang, which I'm just going to find really, really useful. So very pleased with that. On the subject of being able to put filters on the front of the lens, I put a ND filter, Hoya ND 200 Pro filter, which is a 7 2/3 ND filter on the front of the lens, and did some rotational ICM work on these hydrangeas and came up with these few shots that I thought I'd go through with you, and really like that. These were done at 14mm, and again this is using a technique where I rotate the camera and keep stopping around the rotation, so it's 10-second exposure and I keep moving the camera in little steps. But I really love this. Looks like a kaleidoscope type effect, and when you stop the image you can see obviously it prints a version of the image and then you move it around a little bit. But having the option to add the ND filter to the front of the lens and then do other photography, take it off, and all of that is really, really powerful. If you look at my website, loads of ICM stuff, and I'm looking forward to taking the 14-24 Samyang out on an ICM trip. The only drawback of that is that I had to send the copy I had back to Holden, so I need to buy myself a copy because I'm really liking this lens and it does stuff that my other lenses just don't do. So I will replace the Sony 16-35 with the 14-24. So I need to work out how I'm going to do that. So I will be doing that in the near future. And then I just wanted to end with a couple more images of London. I really like the way that these images came out. Got St Paul's down the end of the street and this van racing past, well not racing past, driving past, bit blurred, but again the beautiful sharpness of this, to me it looks pretty nice in this image. Again, it's a sort of interesting doing these things in the real world and then just editing the picture for the picture's sake and seeing whether you can get a picture you're happy with out of whatever the lens is providing you. And I'm quite guilty of comparing this to the Sigma and not seeing whether it just stands on its own. It clearly does stand on its own because it's a great lens and it's created some lovely shots in my view. So yeah, look at the detail of these guys and the bus and all this stuff down here. And this is at 24mm f7.1. And then this last image, which I really like, I was tempted to try and straighten the buildings so that they were all the lines were vertical, but I think it doesn't really give that sense of the height of the buildings if I do that, and it looks a bit weird. So I left it as I shot it, and I really like the image, and I just like how it looks and the amount of detail it down there. I mean, you can see conversations going on and stuff and things happening, and it's just brilliant. And the fact that you've got this 14mm ultra wide view is just great because you just take in so much of the surroundings, and it creates the sense of size, especially in these high buildings and everything. And in a landscape scenario, you know, you can get massive vistas with big skies and all that. So I really lovely view, and this lens does amazingly well at this lovely view. And the whole of my reviews concentrated more on the ultra wide focal length, but then if you're going to get a 14-24, most of the time, well, in my experience, one tends to focus on that really extreme wide angle. So what's my conclusion about the Schneider Kreuznach LK Samyang 14-24mm F2.8 for Sony FE mount? Well, the standout features seem to be the size, the form factor is small and relatively lightweight, and the build quality seems really nice. Everything seems to feel nice about the lens. And then there's the image quality, which is really lovely and sharp. I really like the colours personally, and the fact that you can put a filter thread on to the lens is a real plus, especially for different sorts of photography that you might get up to, you know, landscape photographers with ND filters and the like. So it's a real plus point. The only real con I can find with this lens isn't really about this lens itself. It's only in comparison with the Sigma that I've got, and the Sigma is slightly sharper in the very corners. But given all of the other plus points that this lens has, I can safely say that I'm going to purchase a copy of it and use it in my work. And that's as much of an endorsement as I can give it, really. It's really impressed me with the sharpness and the colour, and just the form factor is really just ideal for what I do. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to getting out there and using it. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and if you want to leave me a comment, tell me what you think of the lens, if you've managed to have a try of it, and if you can like it, and if you want to see more of this sort of content, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you again here soon.